If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn Hansen, your host. Today on the show, you're going to learn how to deal with any anxiety you may have surrounding your hunger. If you experience any sort of fear when you're hungry or when you think about being hungry, I think the ideas you'll hear in this episode will benefit you as you're learning to give up binge eating and learning to eat normally. I'm going to do something similar to what I did 2 episodes ago in episode 60, where I shared one of my coaching audios with you, which was aimed at helping you stay motivated to dismiss the urges to binge. Today I'm going to share another audio with you. It's one of the question and answer audios, which I call my Q&A audios from the Brain Over Binge course. This audio addresses hunger-related anxiety, or the negative associations you may have with your hunger. If you're someone who feels like your hunger is an enemy, I hope that the audio will help you start to develop a healthier mindset. It's possible that you may fear your hunger because you feel like it sabotages your efforts to diet. Or you may fear it because you feel like when it gets strong, it always leads you to binge. Viewing hunger with fear and anxiety is not useful in recovery from binging, and it's also not useful just in making peace with food in general. The Q&A audio that I'll share is about 8 minutes long, and for anyone who may be interested in the Brain Over Binge course, know that there are 83 more audios like this included in the course. If you want to know what other questions are addressed, I've linked to a blog post in the show notes that explains this feature of the course a little more, and it lists all 84 questions that I answer in the course's Q&A recordings. So I won't go into any more detail about that here, but if you feel like you would benefit from more audios like the one I'm going to share, I hope that you'll check out the blog post, which you can also find at brainoverbinge.com/questions. Just like I did when I shared the coaching audio in episode 60, I'm just going to play the audio for you, and then I'll come back at the end to give you a few final comments. So here is the Q&A audio. I fear my hunger. I worry that when I'm hungry, I'll binge. As a binge eater, sometimes there can become a complex and negative association that develops with your hunger. And there are some reasons for this, which I'll talk about, but I do want to say here that hunger is a normal sensation, and as much as you can tell yourself that and learn to not fear the sensations of hunger, the more peaceful your relationship with your hunger will become. Now, when I say you'll have a peaceful relationship with your hunger, I do not mean that you'll like to feel hungry. Hunger is meant to be an uncomfortable sensation that motivates us to fix it by eating. Humans would not have survived without this strong drive. When hunger first starts, it may not be very uncomfortable and it can be just a gentle feeling nudging you toward food, but as more time goes by, it is not going to feel good. You may become irritable, you may not be able to think about anything else besides food. You may get frustrated if you can't get food right away, and you might have a lot of very uncomfortable sensations in your body. Again, this is all normal. So when I say you want to make peace with your hunger, that doesn't mean you're going to feel all these feelings and these sensations that are meant to be strongly motivating you toward food and feel completely calm about it. That's just not realistic. Having peace with your hunger simply means that you'll be able to experience all of that discomfort without thinking that something is wrong with you and without fearing that you're going to binge. You can also think of having peace with your hunger as feeling all those physical sensations that can be very uncomfortable, but not having a lot of self-criticism about it and not having a lot of judgment there. If you think back to maybe when you were a child in school and you were hungry sitting in class and you kept looking at the clock and lunchtime was still a pretty good ways away, I'm sure you did not like that feeling of hunger. I'm sure that you did not feel peaceful in those moments. I'm sure that your hunger and your growling stomach probably distracted you from the work you needed to be doing in class. I'm sure that you had thoughts of food, and I'm sure that you were very excited about eating when the time came. But you didn't judge yourself for it, and there's a big difference there. You weren't sitting there in class saying, I shouldn't be hungry. I only ate 2 hours ago. Why is my stomach growling? I'm so scared that I'm going to overeat or that I'm going to binge. You weren't criticizing yourself for thinking about food or being excited about food. Back when you were a child, hunger was a lot more of a pure experience. You just knew that you were hungry and that you wanted food, but you did not criticize yourself about it. But at some point, these negative associations and these negative thoughts started to develop around hunger. A lot of times this happens as a result of dieting because you're trying to eat less than you need, and therefore your hunger starts to feel like your enemy. When you know you're only allowed a certain amount according to your diet, but your hunger tells you need a lot more than that, then you feel like you need to suppress it and you need to ignore it and you need to be angry with it. You may think that if it wasn't for your hunger, then you could easily stick to your diet. And if you do follow that hunger when you're dieting and you go off your diet, then you add a lot of self-criticism and self-judgment. And then if you start binging at times that you're hungry, then that adds another layer of negative feelings because then you start to fear your hunger because you fear that you'll binge. So then it seems like hunger is not only making you break your diet, it seems like it's making you harm yourself by causing you to eat massive quantities of food. And this is all just to explain how hunger goes from being a pure experience, not a comfortable one, to something that brings up just a lot of anxiety. So an important starting point when it comes to making peace with your hunger is realizing that the sensations of hunger are not the problem. The problem is these negative associations that you've developed surrounding hunger. And you can start trying to separate that out and starting to dismiss some of those negative thoughts you have around hunger and dismiss some of those self-judgments and start gravitating back toward feeling hunger as a more pure experience as you probably did when you were a child. And to decondition any of the fear you have around hunger as it relates to fearing that you'll binge in response to hunger, as you get more and more confident that you won't, then this fear naturally subsides. So in order to break this association, it's going to take many times of being hungry and satisfying that hunger, but then dismissing the urges to go on to binge. Once you're confident that you can eat in response to hunger and then it won't spiral into a binge, then hunger is going to feel like much less of a threat. Eating adequately will also help make hunger feel like less of a threat. Because remember, some of your anxiety about hunger came from the fact that hunger seemed like the enemy when you were dieting. As you give up dieting and as you learn to nourish your body, you start viewing hunger simply as a signal that you need to eat and you stop viewing it as an enemy. You can learn to welcome this signal as your body's way of simply communicating to you that it's time to get food. So don't feel like you have to develop a peaceful relationship with hunger right now because it will naturally happen over time as you dismiss the urges to binge and as you eat enough food. Also know that if restrictive dieting is in your history, then your hunger may be stronger right now than it otherwise would be if you had never dieted. When we diet, our body sort of turns up our hunger, and this makes sense from a survival standpoint. But once you start eating enough, this can sometimes take a while to regulate. So if your hunger feels more uncomfortable than you think it should be, or a lot worse than it felt like before you ever dieted, know that this is something that will correct itself over time as you get further and further away from restriction. Binging can also have the effect of increasing your hunger because your body and brain simply come to expect large amounts of food, so you do have a larger appetite. But when you dismiss the urges to binge and you learn to eat normal, nourishing amounts of food, then your appetite can go back to normal over time. If you feel like your hunger is not regulating over time and it's still seeming abnormally strong, then you do need to take a look at how you're eating and just make sure that you're not inadvertently restricting or purposefully restricting. Your body does truly need to get the message that you are going to eat enough. Another reason for abnormally strong hunger could have to do with blood sugar imbalances, which blood sugar stabilizing foods can help, but it is something you'll need to discuss with your doctor. But even abnormally strong hunger does not warrant a binge. The solution in those cases that I just discussed is to eat more or possibly change the type of foods that you're eating or get some medical help, but the solution is never to binge. One final tip as it relates to hunger is to realize that it can be very helpful to eat before you get extremely hungry. Of course, being extremely hungry does not warrant a binge, but in those situations that you're feeling such strong hunger sensations, it is more difficult for anyone, even non-binge eaters, to avoid possibly eating too much at that time. And it's definitely okay if you eat too much. Remember, you're never trying to avoid all overeating. But early on in your recovery, you may find that the extremes of being way too hungry or way too full just tend to make things harder for you. So in order to help yourself avoid these extremes, You want to try as best you can to plan in advance so that you don't find yourself in these situations where extreme hunger starts to develop. But if it does, allow yourself to eat more than you normally would. Don't expect to be extremely hungry and eat a very small portion or a portion that you would eat if you were only slightly hungry. You are going to eat more if you're more hungry, and that's okay. This is normal. This is nothing to fear. Over time, you'll learn to make peace with many different levels of hunger. That's the end of the Q&A audio. I hope that you can use some of the ideas as you end the binge eating habit and as you learn to eat in a way that feels right for you. Before I end the show today, I do want to mention that the Brain Over Binge course, which includes those 84 Q&A audios, is now in a format where you can start anytime. You can go to brainoverBinge.com/course to read member testimonials and to read about course features and to sign up. One of my goals has been to make extra guidance, like what you heard in the Q&A audio today and the coaching audio in episode 60, more accessible to more people. That's all for today's show. I want you to know that no matter where you are in learning to eat normally and learning to connect with your hunger and fullness, you can keep making progress and you can keep improving and you can find a way of eating that works for you. I also want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.